The Radiant Combine was the premier military force in the known galaxy. With iron discipline, absolute logical precision, and technological superiority, they had conquered 37 civilizations across 12 star systems. Their expansion was methodical, efficient, and, in their estimation, wholly rational. Inferior species required guidance and structure. It was the burden of the Combine to provide it. Grand Marshal Kthar stood on the command deck of the flagship Implacable Logic, his forearms clasped behind his back as he stared the holographic representation of their next target, Planet V-88. His exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh lighting, polished to regulation perfection like everything else in the Combine's military. Vermin, 88, he muttered, using the unofficial nickname that had spread through the ranks. A Gamma-class colonial candidate with abundant resources and manageable indigenous life. His segmented eyes narrowed. The perfect addition to our expansion schedule. Behind him, Vice Commander Zorp shuffled nervously with a data tablet. Zorp had risen through bureaucratic competence rather than battle prowess, and his appointment as second-in-command for this mission had raised eyebrows throughout the fleet. But his connections to the High Council were impeccable, and Kthar knew better than to question the wisdom of his superiors. Grand Marshal, Zorp's voice cracked slightly. I've been reviewing the preliminary probe reports, and there are some concerning anomalies. Kthar didn't turn. Specify. Well, sir, several of the botanical specimens demonstrate unusual mobility patterns and what appears to be territorial hunting behaviors. Particularly troubling is a climbing vine the natives call hugger plant that seems to plant life does not hunt, Vice Commander. Your interpretation is flawed. Yes, sir, but the footage clearly shows. Continue. Zorp swallowed audibly, the sound of his throat membranes sticking together filling the otherwise silent command deck. The wildlife exhibits tactical intelligence far beyond evolutionary expectations. A pack of rodents, similar to what humans would call squirrels, coordinated a distraction maneuver to steal equipment from the probe. They appeared to understand the function of our technology and targeted specific components. Kthar finally turned, his expression a careful blank. Rodents? You're concerned about rodents. There's more, sir. The weather patterns display localized extreme phenomena that correlate with our exploration activities. Hailstones shaped like primitive tools. Fog banks that emit what the audio analysis identified as giggling, atmospheric anomalies, and pareidolia. Nothing more. And lastly, sir, Zorp's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. The signal analysis of native entertainment broadcast shows a disturbing focus on deliberate self-injury activities. Mud wrestling, hot pepper consumption contests, something called extreme unicycling over cacti. It doesn't match any developmental pattern in our sociological database. Kthar stared at his subordinate for a long moment before responding. Vice Commander, I have led 17 successful campaigns against underdeveloped and illogical civilizations. In every case, preliminary reports indicated bizarre behaviors that defied our understanding. And in every case, the application of superior force and rational governance resulted in absolute victory. He stepped closer, towering over Zorp. The enlightenment of logic begins in 3 solar cycles. 200,000 of our finest troops will bring order to this chaotic world. Your concerns are noted and dismissed. Zorp clutched his tablet to his chest like a shield. Yes, sir. I'll prepare the final deployment briefing. 3 days later, the grand departure ceremony filled the main hangar bay of the Implacable Logic. Regiments stood in perfect formation, their powered armor gleaming, energy weapons charged and ready. Each soldier was equipped with reactive armor capable of adapting to virtually any environmental threat, and personal psych harmonizers designed to subdue opponents with soothing brainwaves. They were the pinnacle of the Combine's military might, the iron fist of logical progression. Kthar's speech echoed throughout the chamber, transmitted simultaneously to all 200,000 troops across the fleet. Today we bring reason to chaos. We bring structure to disorder. We bring the superior path of logical progression to a world wallowing in primitive irrationality. The native species will thank us for our intervention once they understand the pure clarity of thought we offer. The enlightenment of logic begins now. The troops roared in response, a perfectly timed and metered cheer that lasted exactly 5 seconds before cutting off in unison. As the deployment pods began loading, Zorp frantically checked his personal gear for the 4th time. Extra. Atmosphere filters. Emergency rations. 13 different communication devices. A small plush toy resembling a Combine young form that he quickly stuffed deeper into his pack when he noticed a junior officer looking his way. The landing zone had been selected with typical Combine precision, a region showing minimal biological activity, according to orbital scans. What the scans had failed to identify was that this minimal activity was actually a temperate rainforest notorious for its complex ecosystem and hallucinogenic fungi. The apparent lack of activity was simply the forest's natural camouflage mechanisms at work. The first warning sign came during atmospheric entry. A swarm of giant insects, each roughly the size of a transport vehicle, crossed the drop path, creating unexpected turbulence that scattered the landing pods across a much wider area than planned. Communication systems crackled with confused reports as units found themselves separated and disoriented in the dense undergrowth. Navigational systems malfunctioning, reported squad leader Vrax. Directional indicators keep shifting. The compass actually told us to turn left at the talking tree before shutting down completely. Maintain discipline. Kthar's voice cut through the static. Regroup at your designated rally points and establish defensive perimeters. Sir, there are no rally points. Nothing matches the topographical maps from orbit. Before Kthar could respond, another report came through, this one from Assault Team Delta. Contact with indigenous megafauna, ursine-type creature, 6 limbs, exuding mild corrosive acid. Deploying psych harmonizer. A moment of silence, then the creature appears, attracted to the harmonizer. It's attempting to hug the device. Request immediate. The transmission ended in a wet crunch. Throughout the forest, similar scenarios unfolded. Energy weapons malfunctioned in the humid environment, either short-circuiting or producing pathetically weak discharges. Armor systems reported bizarre environmental hazards that shouldn't exist. Communications deteriorated into fragmented messages about shadows in the trees, strange fluting sounds, and flowers that ate my gun. Meanwhile, maintenance technician 3rd Class Blorf found himself completely alone. His pod had landed in a swamp, the impact throwing him clear of the vehicle before it sank into the murky water. The lowest-ranking member of the ship's atmospheric filtration maintenance crew, Blorf had been included in the invasion force only because regulations required a specific number of support personnel per battalion. Blorf now stood on a patch of relatively dry ground, clutching his repair toolkit and a copy of standard combined sanitation procedures. His armor was a basic model, lacking most of the advanced features given to combat troops. His only weapon was a small utility laser meant for cutting through clogged filter membranes. "Hello," he called out weakly. "Technical Support Battalion? Engineering Corps." Only the strange, burbling sounds of the swamp answered him. For the next few hours, Blorf wandered aimlessly, trying to follow the distant sounds of battle. The cacophony of weapons, fire, and screams seemed to come from all directions at once, and every path he chose led him deeper into the wilderness. Eventually, he gave up on finding his unit and focused on simple survival. He observed the environment carefully, noticing how certain plants recoiled when approached, while others seemed to reach out invitingly. He avoided both types. He watched small amphibians skirt around patches of colorful moss and followed their example. When a light rain began to fall, he noticed how local insects immediately burrowed into the ground, and he hurriedly sought shelter under a rocky overhang. The acid rain sizzled against his armor, leaving tiny pockmarks in the outer coating. From his shelter, Blorf watched as a patrol of 6 combined soldiers marched directly through the downpour, ignoring the warning signs. Their armor began to smoke, then melt. Their screams cut off abruptly as the comm system in their helmets dissolved. Blorf huddled deeper into his rocky niche, opening his manual to the first blank page and making his first survival note. Rain equals death. Back at the main invasion force, chaos had fully taken hold. Kthar's command post, hastily established in a small clearing, was under constant assault, though not from any organized resistance. Instead, the environment itself seemed to be attacking them. Luminescent fungi released spores that caused mass hallucinations. Tiny parasitic insects infiltrated armor joints, causing maddening itching and loss of concentration. Plants moved when no one was looking directly at them, gradually encircling encampments and cutting off escape routes. "This is madness," Zorp whispered, watching as a squad of elite shock troops fired wildly at what they claimed was a mountain walking on. Chicken legs. There was nothing there but more trees. The planet itself is against us. Kthar, still maintaining his rigid posture despite the deteriorating situation, silenced him with a glare. There is no logic to this resistance. Therefore, it cannot exist. Our sensors are malfunctioning. Our troops are suffering from environmental toxins. Once we identify the specific compounds, we will adapt and overcome. A communication officer interrupted, his voice shaking. "Grand Marshal, Scout Team 7 reports contact with indigenous sentients. A small settlement approximately 5 kilometers east of our position." Kthar's eyes gleamed. "Excellent. Deploy a diplomatic unit with harmonizer support. We will demonstrate our superior intentions and establish a foothold for logical progression." Hours later, the diplomatic unit reported in. Their transmission was garbled, the video feed showing only blurry images of what appeared to be a primitive village built among the trees. The audio was clearer, if no more reassuring. The natives welcomed us, offered a ceremonial beverage made from fermented root extract, initially avoided the harmonizer's influence, but became more receptive after we partook in their ritual drink. The colors. "So beautiful. We are one with the forest now." The transmission ended. All attempts to re-establish contact failed. Another scout team reported on the impossible structure of native dwellings, tree houses, and suspension bridges that defied basic structural analysis, seemingly held together by materials that registered as simple plant fiber but somehow supported weights that should have collapsed them instantly. As the second day of the invasion dawned, less than half of the original force remained in contact with command. The rest were missing, dead, or had gone silent after reporting increasingly deranged observations. Kthar ordered a consolidation of remaining forces and a strategic withdrawal to higher ground, a desperate attempt to find terrain that might offer some advantage against the chaotic onslaught of the planet. Deep in the forest, Blorf had developed an unexpected knack for survival. His insignificance had become his greatest asset. While combat units attracted the attention of predatory plants and intelligent animal packs, Blorf's solitary, cautious movement seemed to register as non-threatening. He observed native people from a distance, noting how they moved with the forest rather than against it. He learned to identify poisonous plants, edible fungi, and how to move silently. His sanitation manual was now filled with crossed-out regulations and crude survival diagrams. He had fashioned a crude poncho from fallen leaves that seemed to repel the acid rain, and he had discovered that certain muds, when applied to exposed skin, prevented the biting insects from finding him. By the third day, Blorf had developed a theory. The planet wasn't hostile. It was playful. In a twisted way, it seemed to enjoy the invasion, treating the mighty combined army like toys in an elaborate game. The more seriously the soldiers took themselves, the more aggressively the planet responded. Blorf's humble acceptance of his own insignificance somehow made him beneath notice. Meanwhile, Kthar's grip on both reality and command was slipping. After accidentally inhaling hallucinogenic spores during a skirmish with what appeared to be intelligent tree sloths, the Grand Marshal became convinced he was negotiating a peace treaty with the king of the squirrels. He ordered his troops to lay down their weapons as a show of good faith to their bushy-tailed allies. Vice Commander Zorp, in a rare moment of decisive action, relieved Thar of command under emergency protocols. With barely a quarter of their forces still operational and supplies running critically low, Zorp ordered a full retreat to the only location that still showed a clear signal on their mapping systems, a region emitting chaotic but stable energy readings that the computers identified as a large-scale artificial structure. The remaining troops converged on the coordinates, fighting their way through undergrowth that seemed to deliberately tangle their path and weather that changed from scorching heat to freezing rain in minutes. When they finally reached the structure, exhausted and traumatized, they found something none of their training had prepared them for: an abandoned amusement park deep in the forest. Flickering lights from ancient game machines, crackling music from damaged speakers, peeling paint mascots with haunting smiles, the smell of mold and rusting oil, all combined to create a sensory nightmare for the already strained soldiers. "What is this place?" Zorp whispered, staring at a slowly turning carousel whose wooden horses seemed to follow him with their eyes. A cultural analyst, one of the few specialists still alive, consulted her database. "It appears to be a primitive entertainment complex. A place where indigenous people deliberately subjected themselves to simulated danger for pleasure." The troops established a defensive perimeter, though defensive was becoming a meaningless concept against an enemy that had no clear form or intention. Soldiers jumped at shadows. Equipment continued to malfunction in increasingly bizarre ways. Communication devices played children's laughter instead of transmitting orders. The final breakdown came when a squad attempted to destroy a haunted house attraction, believing it to be a command center for the resistance. The demolition charges activated the remaining special effects: smoke machines, recorded screams, mechanical ghosts on rusty tracks, causing a panic that led to friendly fire incidents as troops fired wildly at imagined threats. Zorp himself became trapped on top of a slowly rotating Ferris wheel and couldn't be rescued, as the maintenance ladders kept mysteriously disappearing whenever someone tried to climb them. From his involuntary vantage point, he watched as his remaining forces descended into complete madness, unable to find any logic in the deliberately illogical layout of the park. Observing from the safety of an old ticket booth, Blorf realized that the amusement park represented the perfect distillation of the planet's nature. It was designed to confuse, to disorient, to subvert expectations, just like the forest, but in artificial form. He watched as wild animals, raccoons, foxes, moved easily through the park, taking advantage of the chaos. They didn't fight against the madness. They simply accepted it and used it to their advantage. Blorf began to mimic their behavior. He moved slowly, kept to shadows, and took only what he needed, finding some machine oil to lubricate his armor joints, discovering a stash of preserved food in an old concession stand. He accidentally activated an ancient popcorn machine and considered it a gift from the planet, a source of organic energy, as he noted in his increasingly eccentric manual. While the remaining Combine forces either fled into the forest, where most would never be seen again, or huddled in defensive formations that grew smaller by the hour, Blorf settled into a strange coexistence with the abandoned park. He found an old maintenance room where he could sleep safely, repaired a few simple mechanisms out of boredom, and even began to appreciate the twisted humor of the place. Days turned into weeks. Blorf lost track of time, marking the passage of days with notches on his manual's cover. He saw no other Combined soldiers, though occasionally he heard distant screams or weapons fire that grew less frequent as time passed. Then, one day, an automatic emergency beacon on Zorp's armor, still trapped on the Ferris wheel, though Zorp himself had long since disappeared, leaving only his empty suit, managed to send a feeble signal back to the fleet. The Combine, having written off the entire expedition as a total loss, nevertheless dispatched a small automated rescue vessel to investigate. The rescue ship found Blorf sitting calmly in an old duck shooting gallery, attempting to repair a mechanical duck with his toolkit. He wore a poncho made from torn canvas and a cracked helmet adorned with colorful fungi. He offered no resistance, only requesting to bring along his fully notated manual. The debriefing council was composed of the highest-ranking officials of the Combine, gathered in a sterile white chamber aboard the flagship. They expected a tactical report, analyses of military failure, perhaps intelligence on enemy capabilities. What they received was something else entirely. Blorf spoke slowly, almost dreamily, about the irrationality of the planet. He didn't describe enemies, but rather the feeling of the place, a systematic chaos where logic itself was a weakness. He told them about thinking trees, spiteful weather, pranking animals, and the danger that lurked in seemingly harmless things, like silence. He explained that the only way to survive was to abandon logic and embrace irrationality, to become as trivial as the environment itself. The planet doesn't hate, Blorf explained, staring at a point somewhere beyond the council members. It plays. It finds your seriousness amusing. Your logical response is predictable and boring. Your technology is just another toy to be taken apart and scattered. This is preposterous, the head counselor interrupted. 200,000 troops, the finest technology, the most rigorous training, all defeated by whimsy. Blorf shrugged. Logic can't defeat that which doesn't acknowledge logic's existence. You might as well try to insult a rock. And yet you survived, another counselor noted, eyes narrowed with suspicion. I was never important enough to be a good toy, Blorf replied. Just a maintenance technician with a manual. He pushed the battered book across the table. Everything I learned is in here. The counselors examined the manual, which now resembled a work of mad art more than a technical document. Pages filled with crossed-out regulations and replaced with seemingly random observations. Don't trust anything that flowers, especially if it smiles at you. Walk like you're lost, even when you know where you're going. Sing off-key to the rain. It likes music but hates talent. Never run from predators. Skip instead. They'll be too confused to chase. The squirrels are watching. Always. They report to something bigger. The final page contained a crude drawing of what appeared to be the entire invasion force drowning in a sea of question marks, with a single small figure standing on top, wearing what looked like a maintenance uniform with a tiara. The consequences were swift and absolute. Planet V-88 was permanently blockaded, reclassified as an Omega-level cognitive hazard. All records of Operation Enlightenment of Logic were sealed under the highest security protocols. Blorf was given early retirement and reassigned to a remote astronomical observation station, where he spent his days categorizing cosmic dust. A rumor spread among the higher command of the Combine, said to be quoted from Blorf's notes. Don't trust anything that flowers, especially if it smiles at you. It became an unofficial warning among those preparing for planetary invasions. Though none would admit it officially, the Combine began to quietly remove certain types of world from their expansion plans, particularly those with extensive forests, unusual weather patterns, or intelligent rodent life. As for Blorf, he found peace in his solitary assignment. His quarters were decorated with strange mobile sculptures that made no sense from any angle, but somehow felt right. He sang off-key to his dust samples, and sometimes late at night, he could be heard giggling at jokes no one else could understand. Years later, when a junior researcher asked him directly about V-88, Blorf only smiled and said, "The universe doesn't owe us sense. Sometimes the most logical thing to do is to abandon logic altogether." Then he went back to categorizing dust, humming tunelessly, while a small mechanical duck, salvaged from a certain planet, clicked and whirred on his desk, its painted eyes somehow following visitors around the room.